Hey, welcome back, guys. So you can see I'm in my office at work now, so I just wanted to do a shorter part 2 video pertaining to section 1A. So we'll look at a few more examples here, and then I'll look at a couple of your homework problems, kind of work through those for you. Alright, so this one is just like the previous example that we did. We've got basically 10 fallacies here, and we have to match each fallacy with, or the name of the fallacy, with the actual logical fallacy. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to get started. This says you don't support the military's invasion of country X, so of some country, so you must be anti-American or unpatriotic. Okay, this is an example of limited choice. Okay, you're limiting the person's choice. They could perhaps not support this military invasion for many different reasons. So let's see. Limited choice is going to be C. Alright, the next one, it says if Proposition Q fails, your children won't have good schools. Now, in my face-to-face classes, guys, this one sometimes tends to be a bit challenging, so I tell them to skip it and let's come back to it. Okay, so we'll do that. It says, after recently starting a dietary supplement, I noticed that my joint pain was alleviated. Therefore, the dietary supplement must be responsible for my decrease in joint pain. And so what I think we have here is we've got two things coinciding, one preceding the other, but one is not necessarily causing the other. Okay, so this is going to be an example of false cause, which would be I. Okay, the next one, the governor wants to sell public lands to an energy exploration company, but he's an untrustworthy opportunist, so I oppose this land sale. Okay, this seems to me to be a personal attack. Basically, what's happening here is the premise is that this governor is an untrustworthy opportunist, and the conclusion is that the land sale should not go through. Okay. All right. So let's see. Personal attack. This would be H. All right. The next one. My little boy loves dolls, and my little girl loves trucks. So there's no truth to the claim that boys are more interested in mechanical toys, while girls prefer maternal toys. What we have here is a hasty generalization, okay? Remember, we're generalizing based on very little evidence, okay? Just because this boy loves dolls and this little girl loves trucks, that does not mean that across the board, or generally speaking, that's, the stereotype is actually not the case. Okay, so hasty generalization, this would be choice G. Alright, wider highways can relieve traffic congestion. So we should build wider highways to benefit the tourist industry. Okay, again, this one is a bit confusing, so we may come back to it as well. Okay. It looks to me here like the conclusion is that we should build wider highways, okay, to benefit the tourist industry. And the premise is wider highways can relieve traffic congestion. All right, let's go on. The giant sea squid, Architeuthis du, has never been observed in its deep water habitat, so it must be extinct in the wild. Okay, this is a case of appeal to ignorance, because a lack of evidence doesn't mean that something is not actually the case. So this one, let's see. Appeal to ignorance, it is choice A. All right. Responding to Democrats who support doubling the federal minimum wage, a Republican says, the Democrats think that everyone should have the same income. Okay. What we have here, guys, is a straw man argument. Okay. This is probably not what the Democrats actually think, that everyone should have the same income. So whoever said this has distorted, okay, or misrepresented the actual argument behind wanting to double the federal minimum wage. So all right, this would be a straw man. All right. There are approximately 40,000 Chinese restaurants in America compared to about 14,000 McDonald's. Therefore, and this would be the conclusion, Chinese food is preferable to hamburgers. Okay? So the conclusion is that Chinese food is preferable to hamburgers, and the premise is this up here. The premise, guys, this conclusion is based solely on the fact that there are Chinese restaurants appear to be more popular. Okay, so this is an appeal to popularity, which would be choice D. And then the last one, now we got to go back for a couple. It says, Tim Tebow is the most successful college quarterback this decade because he's the best that we've ever seen. Okay, this is circular reasoning, guys. You're really just kind of stating the same thing twice, right? If he's the best that we've ever seen, then he's obviously the most successful college quarterback. And so, those two statements are more or less interchangeable. So this one is circular reasoning, which is B. Oops. All right. Let's go back to this one. This one is kind of tricky because lots of times appeal to emotion solicits positive emotional experiences. Okay, in this case, we're trying to solicit, or whoever is proposing that this proposition fail, or excuse me, whoever wants this proposition to pass or doesn't want it to fail, is trying to use the fact that parents want their children to have good schools. So they're appealing to fear, essentially, okay, which is an emotion. They're basically saying, if this doesn't fail, or excuse me, if this doesn't pass, your children are not going to have good schools, which can be a horrible thing. All right, so appeal to emotion, this would be E. All right, so let's see here. Which one did we not use? Oh, red herring, yeah, okay. Yeah, wider highways can relieve traffic congestion. So we should build wider highways to benefit the tourist industry. Okay, this is a red herring here, guys. All right. Okay, so now what I want to do is look at a couple of your homework problems. Okay, we'll just I'll just kind of go through these with you. All right, so it says consider the following example of the logical fallacy of limited choice. Okay, so remember with limited choice, it's really like there's only two choices available, right? Kind of black and white. If you're not with me, you're against me. And we're going to answer these parts A through C. Okay, so this is the argument. He refused to testify by invoking his Fifth Amendment rights, so he must be guilty. Okay, and this is a thought that maybe a lot of us have had in the past, okay? And it is, basically what's happening here is your conclusion is this person must be guilty because they refuse to invoke their Fifth Amendment rights, okay? As if there's no other reason for which they could be guilty. Okay, maybe they invoke their Fifth Amendment rights just simply because some of the questioning might have ended up being embarrassing or something like that. Okay, doesn't necessarily make a person guilty. All right, so we're going to identify the premise and conclusion of the argument. Okay, so the premise is that he refused to testify by invoking his Fifth Amendment rights. And then the conclusion is he must be guilty. And really pay attention to the wording here, guys, because look at this conclusion. It says he may not be guilty. Okay. It looks like it's going to be choice A. So make sure you read these carefully. Okay, part B, it says, briefly describe how limited choice occurs in the argument. All right, so let's look at these choices. The conclusion is stated as if it were caused by the premise. Well, this would only be the case if this were a false cause fallacy. B, the conclusion is stated as if it were the only possible conclusion. It's looking like it's going to be B. Okay, I'll go ahead and check that unless I see a better. The conclusion is stated to invoke an emotional response. That's not it. The conclusion is stated as the opposite as the premise. Okay, I don't think that's it either, so I'm going to go with choice B. All right, and then this one says, make up another argument that exhibits the same fallacy. Choose the correct answer below. Okay. It says, if a family owns a dog, they cannot also own a cat. B, my favorite football team didn't lose their game this week, so they must have won. C, he wasn't drinking water, so he probably wasn't drinking orange juice either. And then D, I can't definitively show that my wallet was stolen, but I think my wallet was stolen anyway. Okay. These can be kind of tricky, guys. You have to read over them and really think about them. And I get these wrong sometimes as well. I am looking at this. It says my favorite football team didn't lose their game this week. Therefore, they must have won. I'm going to actually go with B. Well, let me check it first before okay. I think it's B because just because they didn't lose their game, that doesn't mean that they won, okay? Remember, lots of times there's more than two choices. Maybe it was postponed, okay, due to a weather event. That happens a lot, okay, in sports. So, anyway. All right, well, I wanted to do one more. I'm going to jump down here to question 9. Okay, it says, in the following argument, identify the premise and conclusion, explain why the argument is deceptive, and if possible, identify the type of fallacy it represents. Okay, so it says, Miguel de Cervantes' book, Don Quixote, is popular because an estimated 500 million copies have been sold since it was published in 1612. I don't have any of you guys read this or read parts of it. I actually did when I was in college. It's very interesting. Okay, it was written in the early 1600s. This was during the what they call the Golden Age in Spain. Okay, the reason I know this is because I took a class on the Spanish literature of the Golden Age. So, anyway. All right, well, let's see what's happening here. It says identify the premise. So I'm looking at this. Remember last lecture how I told you that sometimes these are turned around? The conclusion can actually come first. And if that's done, typically the word because will be used. So Miguel de Cervantes' book Don Quixote is popular. That's probably the conclusion. And the premise is given right here, because an estimated 500 million copies have been sold since it was published in 1612. So that's what I'm going to go with. Okay. All right, we got that. Now it says identify the conclusion. Well, I think the conclusion is going to be that Don Quixote is popular. All right. Oops. Sorry about that, guys. I had my phone on Audible because my chair, or I'm expecting a call from my chair. Okay. Explain why the argument is deceptive. First choice, the argument is deceptive because it assumes that many people reading Don Quixote so he was, Miguel de Cervantes was a playwright. He wrote plays, so Don Quixote, reading Don Quixote plays is evidence that those people actually like Don Quixote. The argument is deceptive because the premise and conclusion essentially say the same thing. So the argument seems logical. Okay, well, let's keep going. The argument is deceptive because it assumes that because Don Quixote has been read for centuries, Don Quixote is good. This is not necessarily the case. And then finally, the argument is deceptive because it makes a generalization about the people who read or who read Don Quixote based on too few cases. Let's see. I think it's actually choice A. Okay. The argument is deceptive because it assumes that many people reading Don Quixote plays is evidence that those people actually like Don Quixote. Okay. And isn't that the case a lot, guys? In school, we have to read lots of things. We may not necessarily like them, but our teachers or instructors evidently see value in us reading those. Okay, so all right, so I'm going to check here. Okay, there's the last part. It says, which type of fallacy does the argument represent? Let's see. I think it's going to be appeal to popularity. Okay, because they're essentially saying because so many people have read Don Quixote, they like it or it's popular. Well, hold on just a minute. This one's a little tricky. I think it could also be false cause. Let's go back and look at I try not to do these beforehand, so let's see, our premise is that, okay, a lot of people have read Don Quixote. And the conclusion is that Don Quixote is popular. I think I'm going to try false cause. Nope. And maybe appeal to popularity. There we go. Like I said, guys, sometimes these can be a little tricky, okay, even for me. This one is a little confusing because it seems a bit as if they're assuming that popular here means is synonymous with likable, okay, or good. It doesn't actually say that. Okay, all right, well, I think I'm going to conclude there, guys. So, this first section isn't too bad. We'll continue working a little bit in 1A next week. I'm going to have a little activity for you to work on. And then we're going to go into Chapter 2, and we'll be working with, it's called dimensional analysis, but really what we're doing is unit conversions, okay? And this can be very practical, if you're in the culinary field or medical field or whatever, converting one unit of measure to another unit of measure. Or even if you're traveling and you need to, convert some dollars to Japanese yen or something like that, okay, using exchange rates. So anyway, guys, I'll see you then.